again, everybody, and welcome to the most exciting half hour in television, the Geno Auriemma Show. It's exciting, can't you feel it?
This is tremendously exciting.
Well,
Compared to the game the other night, this is a lot more fun.
riveting, actually.
Yes.
Is due to that, are you wearing black for a reason?
Yes. I'm in mourning for a couple days, and I think I'm going to leave coaching and go into the priesthood.
I don't think they're going to let you in.
Maybe not.
I thought about wearing black in your honor in
Thank you.
memoriam, but I figured I'd throw a splash of blue to try to brighten up the day and the mood.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, there's a lot to talk about in the North Carolina game, but before we get to that,
Why?
I'd like to talk about the Hartford game.
Okay.
A fun rivalry with you and Jen Rosati, your former player. But the nice thing about this year was, as opposed to last year, which is the first time you played, less talk of you and Jen, and it was more focus pretty much on just the game and the players and the teams.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way it is with most teams that we play. Unfortunately, with Jennifer, it's unusual because you're talking about one of the greatest players in the history of Connecticut basketball, and she's right next door, and it's a great story. But I think if you ask Jen, she would tell you that her team is the story, and the kids on her team are the should be the focal point. And for this game, at least anyway, it was, and hopefully it'll continue to be that way.
Well, I mean, last year they played you tough, and I know you weren't real thrilled with the way the game went last year, but this year, again, you're more talented than they are. They play hard, they play scrappy.
It's a no-win situation for us. You know, you often wonder sometimes, why do you even play the games like that? If in the end you're going to constantly have to justify, you know, well, how was the game played? Well, the game's going to be played the same way all the time.
Right.
You know, and if and when, you know, the talent evens out, then it'll be played different. But the way it's going to be played right now is you know, we're going to have players like, you know, we have that can make certain plays, and they're going to have players that they have that athletically can't match up. And, you know, so all we can do is look bad unless we win by 50, which then, you know, if you're Hartford, you say, well, why should we play this game? So, you know, we did some great things. Kalina, I think, made some inroads, you know, and showed, I think, some skills that she has. You know, but all in all, I don't think it was one of those performances where you would say, you know, we looked outstanding and did everything right, and you know, because that's not the case. We did a lot of good things. We, you know, we kept the pressure on most of the game. We, you know, we took advantage of the talents that we have, and that's what we're supposed to do. And Hartford and on the flip side, did what they needed to do. And I'm sure if they'd have made their free throws, it would have been a little bit different game. But they've taken that game and since have gone on and blown out everybody they've played.
Yeah,
so
they just killed Fairfield.
you know, it's Jennifer treats it the right way. If they beat us, it's great. But they don't go into the game thinking if we lose, oh my God, you know, the season's going down the drain. I mean, they take it for what it's worth, and we need to do the same thing.
Would you like to see this game continue? And do you plan on playing them in the future?
Yeah, I like to do that. You know, I want to play against Hartford at the Civic Center. I think it's a good game for us, especially if it comes right before finals or right before the holidays. You know, it's easy. You know, it's a home game for both teams.
Right.
And
it'll always be a competitive game, just by virtue of the way they play.
Yeah, it'll always be competitive. You know, we keep playing like we played against North Carolina, and it'll be even more competitive. But you know, sometimes there's business decisions made that I don't necessarily agree with, and I don't want this to be one of them.
All right, very good. Well, the second half, we do have highlights of second half action from the Hartford game, which you had a pretty good lead at halftime, but then you came out, I thought, and Ann had a much better second half.
Yeah, you know, teams are not they're not stupid. I mean, they're going to figure out pretty quickly. You know, we've got to get after Mel and Ann and make sure that they don't get a lot of open looks. So what you just saw there, where, you know, Ann and Mel both taking the ball to the basket, that's something that we're going to have to do much more often. You know, we have to execute, and we've got to get the right people, the right kind of shots. Something like that is a great way to do it, you know, where we dribble, penetrate, and draw the defense, and then kick it. That's a great move right there. You know.
That's just a flash of some of her athleticism.
Yeah, yeah. You know, she's and T, you know, comes off the bench, and look at that shot, huh? Using every part of the rim, huh? You know, we've got bits and pieces of what we need. You know, and in the Hartford game, we used bits and pieces, but pulling it all together is going to be the biggest challenge.
So, okay, pulling it all together, you know, you're getting ready for the North Carolina game. What did you think leading into that, the practice before, the shoot around the day of? Did you think you guys were ready? Did you think you were going to, did you think you would play like you did, or did you expect it to be very different?
No, I think as a coach, you put your game plan together with the idea that if we execute this game plan, we're going to win the game. And I'm interrupting you, but very rarely, in all the years that I've been around, very rarely does your team not execute your game plan. And that's been one of your strengths, where you put a game plan together and it always gets run and it's always effective. And it seemed to be one of the first times. Yeah. Well, you know, we spent a couple days before the Oklahoma game really stressing this is what we have to do. And there was a tremendous amount of focus by the kids, and we executed it almost perfectly. You know, we took a similar approach for the North Carolina game, and the results were completely different. You know, how do you explain that? I don't know. I wish I knew.
Yeah, didn't I read somewhere where you said the ball gets tossed up, you know, the opening tip, you get it, your very first offensive sequence, completely in shambles, you know, compared to how you drew it up.
Right.
And
again,
it was all downhill from there.
Yeah, yeah, and there's probably a lot of thoughts on that. You know, why? Obviously, as a coach, we didn't do it enough in practice. You know, we didn't do it enough. If we'd have done it a little bit better, a little more often, that wouldn't have happened.
But now, if you did it enough before the Oklahoma game, why wasn't it enough before the North Carolina game? And I understand, as a coach, you have to take accountability for your teams.
But the results are what counts. You know, you can say, well, we did this, we did this, we did that. You know, the proof is in the pudding, as they say. You know, and the results weren't there, so obviously the preparation wasn't there. You know, and I think we take full responsibility for that.
Were you surprised by the scoring droughts in each half?
You know, I don't think that I was surprised by the scoring droughts. We go through some of these things in practice, you know, and that's a perfect example right there. I wish we could run it back. You know, you've got one kid standing there not paying attention. You've got another kid making a pass, you know, who's not paying attention, and you know, and that's all part of. You know, and it's all part of what coaches have to do. You know, you have to make players respond to certain situations. You know, what makes a player do that? You know, what makes a player, you know, make a play like that? You know, what makes somebody, you know, push the ball up the floor and attack the basket one time, and then another time, you know, it's a mindset, I think, that you bring in. You know, we just told Keisha, you know, our guys, we want to score off a dribble penetration, and you know, first thing she does is take a jump shot. Now, so you're wondering when people are not confident in themselves, when they're not sure of themselves, they're not really listening. You know, they're more thinking about, oh my God, what do I, you know, what
I want to mess up.
You know, when you're talking, you know, someone who's confident, feels good about what they can do, what they can't do, has a pretty good handle on their game. When you're giving them instruction, I equated it in practice and the other night to being in class. You know, when you're in high school or you're in college and you're taking a class, and you're looking at the teacher, and they're talking to you, and they're giving you, it was like that for me in math, and you're talking, but you're not really, and you're listening, but you're not really getting it. And then next week you find out that you just missed all of last week, and it just gets worse and worse for you. And believe it or not, there's players that are like that. And as a coach, you got to figure out, eventually, how do I get through to those kinds of players? And we seem to have some of those right now.
Yeah, which in the past, I don't think you did. So as much as I thought you guys, the first offensive possession of the game, I thought you looked scared. I could tell that you guys weren't running offense, and I don't know if it was fear or what it was, but all that being said, you had a huge drought, a scoring drought in the first half, but you made a little run and got it to within 12, I think, at the half?
Yeah, there was about 3:40 left or something like that in the game, and we talked about, because I think one time we're down 19, and during one timeout we talked about getting it under 10 before we go into halftime, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, and you were close to that.
And we got it to 12, had the ball, the last possession, had an open shot, and I thought we went into halftime with a lot of momentum.
Right. And so what was your halftime speech? What did you say?
Well, at halftime we went over. We had said going into the game that there were a couple of really important keys to the game. One, let's not give them any threes. Make them earn twos. And the first 3 shots they made were threes. So there's just the sense of whatever. We can't throw them the ball because they live off of turnovers, and so they had 15 points in the first half off of our turnovers, and we're down 12. So the 3
Take
threes,
care of the ball.
3 threes, take care of the basketball, and it's a whole different story. We didn't do either of the 2 things we said we wanted to do. So now at halftime it's like, so listen, if we do those things, what are we going to do? I mean, you can't all of a sudden have a different game plan. This is the game plan. And we know that if we do these 2 things, when we get back out there, we're going to be fine. So we go out, first possession, Mel gets fouled. Now we're going to go to free throw line, cut it to 10, and we're rolling. She misses both free throws, and it's good night.
Yeah, we do have second half highlights.
There and at times, there did appear to be a little in the basket, but then again, shots like that aren't exactly the winning edge.
Right.
Those are not the kind of shots that, you get a 5-second call there because nobody screens for anybody. It's just a total breakdown, and you almost feel like that's that's a possession right there that you just shake your head and say, when did that happen? How did it get to that point where we got a layup down at one end, and they get a layup at the other end.
And then Ann shots halfway down, and then Will loses the ball out of bounds.
Yeah.
It was just nothing could go right for you.
But that's of your own making most of the time. And Carolina helped us in a lot of ways. We wanted to self-destruct a little bit, and they made sure that we did.
Yeah.
Sometimes you want to self-destruct and you want to play lousy, and the other team plays worse. So you go, okay, well, I guess we'll win. And this one, we were kind of, all over the place, and Carolina says, oh, okay, well, we'll help you, and we'll beat you by 30.
The free throw blues.
The free throw blues.
Last year, you guys were not very good from the free throw line.
In stretches we were, but overall, no.
And now this year, the trend seems to be continuing. A couple players are shooting. There's like 4 kids who are above 80%, I think.
But we were shooting almost 72% going into the game.
Which
is pretty good.
Which is pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
And then, sadly,
5 for 16.
Yeah, sadly against North Carolina, the wheels fell off.
Yeah. And again, that's...
Especially someone like Mel, who's such a good shooter.
Yeah, you got Mel goes 3 for 6. Now, the other guys are going to go 3 for 6. So if you're Mel, you got to go 6 for 6
Right.
because you're a good free throw shooter.
Right. What is the reason for poor free throw shooting?
Generally speaking, lack of concentration and the wrong guys at the free throw line a lot of times. You notice you don't see Ann Struther's name up there. She's a really good free throw shooter. You know, but Mel.
Yeah, these are season numbers.
You know, the wrong people get to the line, and you know, look at Mel. She's missed 6 for the season. She misses 3 in one game.
Yeah.
So it's mindset. You know, as far as Brittany, Sade, Barbara, they're just awful free throw shooters because mentally they can't concentrate and make free throws. We shoot them every day in practice, and they don't make them in practice.
Yeah. So how are you going to make them in a game if you don't make them in practice?
You're not. You're going to make half of them. Or when everything's flowing right, you know, and the planets are all lined up just right, you know, you're going to make them all. But generally speaking, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, that's hard to, you know, it's hard to try to, because the whole thing for you as a coach is you got to trust your players.
Yeah, free throw shooting.
You know your kids aren't going to make free throws.
Yeah, I mean,
so
free throw shooting is just doing it enough times, getting a routine, being confident, and making them.
Right.
And knowing that you're going to make them. And there's a theory too that, you know, if you practice a lot of free throws in practice and shoot a lot of them and miss a lot of them, really what you're doing is reinforcing missing. You're better off not shooting them at all.
Yeah.
You know, if you shoot 25, 30 free throws every day in practice and you go 15 for 30, what you're doing is you're leaving practice going, I'm a 50% free throw shooter. You know? And that's just, it's what can I tell you? Got to get the right people fouled.
Okay, so look to the future. The sun did come up the day after the North Carolina game. You have Villanova coming up.
Not at my house.
It's a nice house, though.
Not at my house. Eagles lost 42-0.
Oh, Eagles got crushed. That was.
At least we didn't lose by 42. And you know, and I got nice football in my office from Andy Reid. You know, Geno, bring home another championship. You know, yeah, thanks, Andy.
Yeah, you two can both wallow in your sorrows.
Yeah, absolutely.
Monday morning was a bad day for the two of you.
Yes, it was.
Well, you got Villanova coming up after this show. In some respects, it stinks to be playing Villanova because they're a pain in the neck to play. But I think in a greater respect, it'll certainly get your team's attention. Not that they need any more focus right now.
No, I mean, would you rather play anybody else rather than Villanova right now? Yes, absolutely. Because if you're already in a state of frustration and agitation, you know, which we are right now, there's no worse team to play than Villanova. They're going to frustrate you even more. So, you know, these few days of practice and this game hopefully gets us back on the right track. But there's a lot of work for this team to do. All of us, coaches, players, everybody, and we'll see whether it pays off or not.
Talk a little bit about Villanova's style.
Well, very, very old school, you know, very, a lot of movement without the ball and using the shot clock and trying to wear you down mentally as much as anything else. And, you know, they're the kind of team that will pass the ball for 28 seconds and then with 2 seconds left on the shot clock, knock in a three, you know. And if you have the lead against them, it's tough. It's tough for them to come back if they get down. But if they have the lead, it's very difficult to come back on them, you know.
Are you glad to be playing them right now?
I'm never glad to be playing them.
Harry can't be glad about the North Carolina game. Did he call you?
We talked before the game, but not since. No, not since. But they've got a very experienced team coming back, you know, and they've had some good wins already. You know, they beat Penn State, they beat Mississippi, and defensively they're not big, they're not quick, but I think they're very skilled offensively and very experienced. Liad Suez is one of the better players in the league, and Jackie Adamczyk is one of the better players in the league. And they've got two experienced guards. Jenna Vianney's back from her injury, and Betsy McManus is fiery little point guard. So they've got they've got a really good team, and this should be a tough test. And add to the fact that it's on the road. It's at Villanova, which, by the way, supposedly the Big East schedule was made randomly, and we're at Villanova, at Notre Dame, at Rutgers, at DePaul, at Louisville. So somebody's trying to tell us something.
Yeah, you got your work cut out.
Yeah,
for
we
you.
do. Yeah, we do.
Okay, now for our favorite segment of the show, the Ask Geno.
Ask Karnak from now on. I want to make up.
Do you know all that much? That's the question.
We need a window in the back with a David Letterman top 10 just fired into the screen over there. Go ahead.
Talk a little bit about recruiting. You alluded to the fact that some of the kids, you want to start recruiting your types of kids. I read in the paper you said that. What does that mean?
Well, in recruiting, you're always rolling the dice and you're taking chances. Mm-hmm. And, for a 20-year stretch there, the dice keep coming up exactly the way you want them to come up 99% of the time. Mm-hmm. And what happens is you get pleasant surprises. Mm-hmm. A Jen Rosati that everybody thinks is going to be good turns out to be National Player of the Year. A Carol Walters, who a lot of people don't want to recruit, turns out to be National Player of the Year. A Rita Williams, who can't even get on the court as a sophomore, turns out to be MVP of the Big East tournament. And so you get all kinds of surprise. And then on the other side too, there's you recruit kids who you think are going to be really, really good, and they've got this and they've got that, and then once you're with them for a year or 2 years, you realize they don't have it. So. Mostly it's getting harder in recruiting because the personalities of these kids have changed so much.
And why is that, do you think?
They play so many games during the summer. They do so many camps and
the
tournaments,
AAU.
the whole thing, that by the time you talk to them, they're like this. I mean, there's this, it's just the majority of these kids coming out today are kind of numb to, it's just they just play games.
And do you think that part of the whole AAU process where, they play so much and, they play year-round, and,
Mm-hmm.
They have got these AAU coaches telling them that they're the greatest thing to ever play the game.
Yeah.
Do you think that, and plus the recruiting rules have become, I think, so restrictive that you can't really get to know a lot of these kids.
No, it's bigger guesswork than it's ever been.
Yeah.
And it was always guesswork. It's even more so now. Back in the day, I could call a kid once a week, twice a week, 3 times. I could talk to them as much as I wanted. Mm-hmm. Now, you're really restricted in how much you can talk to them, really restricted in how much you can find out about them. And add to the fact that they play all these games, and you've got all these people around them telling them things, and they're not into winning anymore. You don't see players talk about winning. They talk about playing. So they just play. They're not playing to win. And that's a whole different mindset, that you have to get used to, I guess.
Yeah.
And at a place like Connecticut, you can't just come and play.
Right.
You have to play to win.
Right. Yeah. Something here, in some of your more successful years, you've had a walk-on, like a Stacey Marin and Marcy Zell, who became like the fan favorite. Mm-hmm. You don't seem to have any of those. Do you think your program misses a player like that? Do you think that player adds value to your roster?
Every player adds some value to your roster. I don't know that, the walk-on thing is what gets you over the hurdles that you have to get over. Mm-hmm. I think it's a neat thing to do when the occasion presents itself. But having a first-team All-American handling the ball in the backcourt, that's worth a lot more than any walk-on.
How do you decide, we only have about a minute left, who's the captains of your team?
A lot goes into it. What happens in the preseason, what happens, September, October. There's this misconception out there that, whoever plays a lot and whoever's really popular is the captain. I don't necessarily name the most popular players captains. I try to use people who set a good example for what is important.
And the
we have a lot of
captains-
great players
Right.
that will never be captain because they don't set the kind of example that you want, you know. And our two captains this year, Ann and Nicole, both do.
All right, very good. Well, thank you very much. I'm sorry to say we're out of time, and I know it was riveting for both of us.
I am riveted.
Folks, the Villanova game is coming up next. Please stay tuned here to CPTV, and please send us your questions. We'll try to get to more questions. I wish we had more time. There's a lot more questions I wanted to get to this show. So please stay tuned and write your questions in. Keep watching, and we'll see you soon.
And as you see the coaches, you know, Harry and I are the same age. Just remember that.